Okay.
You're listening to the Mac and Jack Sports Show on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Jack, can you hear me now?
Do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
You're
And-
low though, but I can manage. Like
Okay,
Sergeant
cool.
Carter would say on Gomer Pyle, I can hear you.
Right, and I think we got Doc
I
back
clear
here.
now.
Woo! What happened? That intro blow you guys off there? What happened there? Yes.
The
Yes,
intro
sir.
blew us off, yeah.
I was going to leave the show and take the day off, but then I kind of reconsidered. It would be the equivalent of walking out on the team, but I
Yes.
decided
Yes.
I didn't want to get fined. So,
Oh man, I figured what a better intro than dueling banjos.
forget that intro.
For the Mac and
Throw it
Jack
out. I mean,
Mac and Jack Sports Debate Show.
probably
So,
lost some people. We probably lost some viewers.
listen, Jack, we might have gained a bunch of country viewers. Who knows? So, anyway, today on the show, as you see, folks, we have the great Paul Semendinger, who is a Yankee expert. He runs the Start Spreading the News blog over there. He's the founder. He's also an award-winning author. So we're happy to have him on every Saturday. And of course, as you know, folks, I'm your host with Jack Hirsch. We're going to change the format a little bit, guys, that we normally do. We normally have a set format every Saturday because of the news of Hank Aaron. And we're going to dive into that right after the sports updates because we want to get those out of the way real quick. But I really want to delve into Hank Aaron, what he meant to baseball and the legend he was. So in the updates, Matt Patricia has rejoined the Patriots as their coordinator, Jack. So he's fired from the Detroit Lions, and the Patriots scooped him right back up, which brings back together their team over there, their offensive and defensive coordinators, Jack.
Well, it's important to keep good relationships. Obviously, Matt Patricia didn't burn any bridges with Bill Belichick, and he's back with him. And that's a good move for the Patriots.
I think so, too. I think it really is. It kind of brings back the stability they had. Ben Simmons fires back at the social media critics after scoring 11 of his 15 points and making huge plays to lead the 76ers over Boston 122-110, Jack. Simmons can score when he wants to. It's just that he's not a pure shooter, Jack.
Ben Simmons is a huge talent, and I'm going to be shocked if he's not a major star in the NBA before his career is over. I don't like him paired with Joel Embiid. That's just my opinion. I just don't think it's a good mix. I think Ben Simmons would be better off elsewhere unless Embiid gets moved, but just my opinion.
I agree with that too, Jack. I agree with we're in agreement so far. What the heck's going on? This is the 1-year anniversary of Kobe Bryant's death. Of course, there's a lot of memorial services going on for him, one of the greatest basketball players of all time. The NBC Universal Studios is shutting down its sports content, Jack, and it's moving it over to live streaming services like ours over at Peacock probably, and maybe some other places. So there are sports networks that are kind of cutting back. ESPN has done it with their workers, and now NBC has shipped its sports. It's going to be shipping its sports out of different outlets. So everyone during this time, Jack, is kind of cutting back. It's not just small, businesses that are going out of business and big business out there that is cutting its workforce, but also in sports, Jack. So that's a major story as far as sports streaming goes. Patrick Mahomes is out of concussion protocol and will be ready to play against the Bills. A big story there, Jack.
A major. I mean, if Chad Henne was going to be starting for the Chiefs, we would have looked at the Bill-Chief game a much different way. The Bills still have a genuine shot at upsetting the Chiefs and winning the game. But with Patrick Mahomes in there, that's huge for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Definitely. Antonio Brown's knee injury is going to keep him from playing up against Green Bay, Jack. I mean, Antonio Brown wasn't there before. They still had a good team, but they seemed like Brady and Antonio Brown were getting their their rhythm together.
No, not having Antonio Brown could turn out to be crucial, because if Tampa Bay is going to win, it's going to be a close game, and Antonio Brown is a deep threat that his replacements aren't going to be. So that could potentially be huge. And the other guys are going to have to step up, like definitely Mike Evans and so on.
Yeah. And let's see, the drama, I would say, the Brooklyn Nets has been extended, and they lost to the Cavs for the second time in a row. And the thing that interested me, Jack, more than the players, with their head coach Steve Nash said, they said that they're not a defensive team. Their team is built to score offense. I mean, what is that? I mean, no, your team has got to start playing defense.
James Harden is a scoring machine, but with Kyrie Irving, he has to play point guard. He has to shoot less, pass more. James Harden holds onto the ball too long. The offense is messed up. Kyrie Irving's a great individual talent. When you look at the box score after every game, you're going to be impressed with what Kyrie Irving did, because you're going to see a lot of points, decent shooting percentage, but the rebounds are going to be down, the assists are going to be down, and the defense that you don't see on the box scores are going to be down. And it's not a good chemistry for a winning formula, having Kyrie Irving, as your lead guy there. It's just not.
I agree, Jack, again, and I think that's going to be the downfall of the Mets. I mean, the Nets this year. They rhyme with Mets, so I'm close.
See, like a Yankee fan, you have to think negative about the Mets. It came out.
Yeah. And in college football news, Jack, Notre Dame is on probation for recruiting violations. It seems like every team, one time or another, is on probation because of this, Jack.
Notre Dame is supposed to be so ethical, what they stand for. Notre Dame on probation? That means just put everyone on probation before the year begins.
You're right. I agree. If they're on probation, everybody should be on probation. I agree with that. So, guys, that's the quick sports update. I didn't mean that to talk to you there, Doc, but I wanted to save you for what we're going to be talking about next, and that's Hank Aaron, a living legend, passed away yesterday. And I want to get into this morning, and this is the perfect show to do it. As I said to you guys before the show, I have two of the most knowledgeable baseball people. I'll put you up against any experts in national sports. You guys know about not only the Yankees, but you guys know about baseball, period. And Coach folks, that's Dr. Paul Semendinger and Jack Hirsch. So before we get into his specific achievements and the legacy and his achievements and his stats, I'm sure we can come to an agreement here, guys, that there is a pecking order in baseball, right? You have a pecking order in pitching, you have a pecking order in defense, you have a pecking order in your offense, but there are like a top 4 to 5 baseball players in history, in my opinion, anyway, right? I mean, if there was a Mount Rushmore of baseball, I have no doubt that you both would agree with me that Babe Ruth would be probably the first one there, not only for his offense, his home run hitting, the way he drove in runs, his batting average over 340. He was a legitimate pitcher who had multiple 20-game winning seasons. He still has the lowest ERA in World Series history, and he still has the biggest on slugging percentage is what I'm trying to say in baseball history. And what he did for the game and frankly for team sports in general. I mean, he put Major League Baseball on the map. This was not a huge thing at that time when he first started. It was more or less a ballpark game. You guys went out and played, or you went and saw some teams. But to come to the national stage as Babe Ruth brought it there, they just went to see him play, and he filled stadiums. So I would think that we could come to agreement that Babe Ruth is probably the most significant, not only baseball player, but maybe one of the most significant sports figures in the history of sports. Would we all agree with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it comes down to the next 3 where you could either change the order or you could say we could debate about who was there. I think we can agree maybe that Willie Mays would be in there, probably the greatest center field of all time, power, speed, 12 Golden Gloves in his history. So he would be there, I think. I think you could say Lou Gehrig would be there, probably the greatest first baseman of all time. Batted 340, drove in almost 2,000 runs, and played unbelievable amount of games. So I think he would be there. And to me, the 4th person on there would be Hank Aaron. And the reason why I say that, guys, is because if you look at him not only breaking Babe Ruth's record with 755, to me, truly the home run king without PEDs. I mean, to me, he's the true home run king. He had over 3,000 hits and also was a great base runner stealer. I mean, he stole a lot of bases, and he was a Golden Glove right fielder. So I think you could be comfortable and say maybe that's the Mount Rushmore. I mean, you could debate maybe Mickey Mantle should be up there and Ted Williams. But I think if you really looked at overall and their history in baseball, especially Hank Aaron and what he accomplished and what he went through to reach those feats, I would think that would be your top 4. If you guys can agree with that, I'm not sure, but I think that would be it.
I would say it's what's your criteria? Is it peak value? If it's peak value, and let's say we're talking about pitchers, no one was greater than Sandy Koufax at his absolute peak. But if you're talking over the course of a career and longevity, okay, that's another matter. And when you talk about over the course of a whole career, Hank Aaron was arguably only the greatest ball player from, let's say, 1950 until the present time, the last 70 years. If you look at the amount of years he played, the numbers he compiled, and keep in mind, the numbers then, you have to, in a certain sense, prorate compared to today's numbers. They say, well, Hank Aaron never hit 50 homers in a year. Well, 40 homers then was more like 48 homers today in this era. And how many players do that? And Hank Aaron was just consistently great year after year. I mean, played, 23 years, made 21 all-star teams. And the all-time RBI leader, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I think an RBI total over a career is a greater stat than a home run title, but we're caught up in the glamour of the most home runs over a course of a career. I like the idea of the RBIs, and Hank Aaron had 2,297 RBIs. Let's give him 3 more RBIs for argument's sake. That's a pittance. That means over the course of 23 seasons, he averaged 100 RBIs, meaning he was a super player for 23 years. I mean, who plays that long? Who produces like that for that long? And especially Doc could appreciate that, being a fanatical Yankee fan. Mickey Mantle was asked who the greatest player was of all time, right after he retired at the end of his career as well. And I remember the interviews, and he said he thought Hank Aaron was a little better than Willie Mays. And I'm not saying I agree with that, but that was Mickey Mantle's opinion. And they asked Mickey Mantle, did he think he was as good as them? And Mickey Mantle said, well, when I was at my best for two or three years, I wouldn't say I was better than Hank and Willie, but I would say I was just as good. Okay? And one thing about Mickey Mantle, he was a very modest guy, but he loved Henry Aaron, just loved him. And Mickey Mantle would rave about Henry Aaron. Doc, you have anything? What are your thoughts on Henry Aaron?
Well, the first 2 words I wrote down when we were going to talk about Hank Aaron were class and dignity. So he brought a different level of class and dignity to the game. And, everybody knows about all the stories about when he was chasing Hank Aaron, Babe Ruth's home run record, and death threats and doing it in the South. And, you could make the argument he had every right to be angry and bitter about the way that the world treated him. And instead he rose above, and he was always a great person. I was listening to an interview yesterday where I think it was Michael Kay who was saying that, there are a lot of people who are superstars and they get focused on who they are. We were sort of talking about this before the show too, and it becomes all about me, me, me. And Hank Aaron never became that. He was quiet. He exuded grace and politeness. And even in difficult times, he never took it out on other people. I think when you're talking about that Mount Rushmore, it becomes very hard not to include Hank Aaron. I think Babe Ruth becomes automatic, as you said. I think Hank Aaron becomes the number 2 guy. He was 3rd all time in hits. So he had 3,771 hits. If you want to say he's 1st or 2nd in home runs, we could debate that, but still he had 755 home runs. As Jack said, he has the all-time RBI record of 2,297. According to Baseball Reference, he was an all-star 25 times.
Yeah.
I counted up. He hit 40 or more homers 8 times. He drove home 100 or more RBIs 11 times. But maybe this is the greatest statistic of Hank Aaron that people might not look at as much. He had 6,856 total bases, which again is all-time. So, Babe Ruth was great. You can't take anything away from Babe Ruth. He was a phenomenal baseball player. But Babe Ruth was less of a three-dimensional athlete than Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron hit lots of doubles. He hit lots of triples. He had lots of base hits. He played outstanding defense. He had an excellent arm. You could get into the argument of, well, who was better? They sometimes do this with pitchers. They say, like, well, how can you say Mariano Rivera is the greatest relief pitcher of all time, or the greatest pitcher of all time, or the greatest Yankee pitcher? A relief pitcher is only a failed starting pitcher. So how could you be the best if you're a relief pitcher? You hear arguments like that sometimes. So you could argue, how could Hank Aaron be better than Willie Mays? Because Willie Mays played center field. And if Hank Aaron was as good as him, he would have played center field more instead of right field. But I think those arguments just get silly. I would say that the guy played all those years. He put up all those numbers. There's nobody who has any more total bases than Hank Aaron. No one who drove in more runs. And look, you want to get the home run record to Barry Bonds by numbers? Fair enough. He's number 2, and then he's number 3 in hits. I don't see how you can argue any of those things on top of being just an exceptional human being.
Well, I think there was a certain bias, and I know I showed the bias for a lot of years, and I have to admit it is a bias. Guys who played in New York were always given an edge, okay, because it's a glamorous place to play. Let's say Willie Mays had played in Milwaukee and Hank Aaron had played in New York, and let's say Mickey Mantle had played in Baltimore. How would we have looked at things? Hank Aaron would have been elevated in our mind, okay? And the other guys would have been slightly diminished in our mind despite their great accomplishments. So playing in New York at that time meant a tremendous amount. Even now it means a little bit. Imagine Mike Trout played for the Yankees instead of the Angels right now.
Yeah.
Okay. And even in this age in social media, Mike Trout's kind of been hidden in a certain sense playing for the Angels. We know how great he is, but we don't get to see how great he is that much. And I think that was the case with Hank Aaron. That and what Doc mentioned, but I'll disagree with Doc a little. I think center field was regarded as the glamour position. And I think it elevated the great Willie Mays and the great Mickey Mantle to an extent because they played off one another. Who's the greatest center fielder? And the perception always was that the center fielder had the most responsibility. He was the take charge guy in the outfield. So I think that maybe played slightly against, a right fielder in comparison to a center fielder.
Well,
I think that's fair.
Well, let me get to a few stats, and I'm going to talk to you about that New York connection that you were talking about, Jack. You always seem to segue into some of the stuff I'm going to say. It's like almost like telepathy. So, Hank Aaron,
I'm filling in the gaps. I'm leading you on, like I'm the warm-up.
So Hank Aaron had a lifetime batting average at 305, which is better than Pete Rose's. Not as good as Ruth or Garrick's. He had 755 home runs, as we know. Over 3,371 hits. He was a 25-time All-Star, had 3 Golden Gloves, 4-time home run leader with 1,477 extra base hits. And at the beginning of his career, guys, he almost signed with the New York Giants baseball team. So could you imagine Willie Mays and Hank Aaron in the same outfield? But the Braves offered him $50 more a month. And that's why he went to Atlanta. That's the only reason. In 1951, he hit the pennant-clinching walk-off home run to beat the Cardinals, and the Braves went on to beat the Yankees in the World Series. During the World Series, Hank Aaron hit 393, 3 home runs, and 7 RBIs. And in 1963, became the 3rd player in history to steal 30 bases and hit 30 home runs. In 1970, he got his 3,000th hit. By 71, he had his 600th home run. In 1973, he finished the season at 713 home runs, one shy of Babe Ruth's record, with thousands of death threats, as Doc said, and receiving over 930,000 pieces of mail that one year. So Babe Ruth's widow actually came out and publicly denounced the criticism and said that Babe Ruth would have cheered on for Hammer and Hank to break his record. So it was so bad back then. Not only let's go back to the beginning. He had a shot to play with the Giants. So that outfield would have been unbelievable with Willie Mays and Hank Aaron together playing there for the Giants. And who knows how many World Series the Giants would have won with both of them. And, the racism that was going on back then, which is a lot worse than it is today. Actually, Babe Ruth's widow came out to denounce this stuff. And one quick side note on that, guys, in the popular comic strip, The Peanuts, Lucy says Hank Aaron is a great baseball player. Well, Charles Schultz got death threats for that. So this is how bad it was back then. In the early 70s, that here's this racism, and as Doc said, the way Hank handled it was with dignity and class. In fact, he really never celebrated beating Babe Ruth's record until after his retirement, years after that, where he actually smiled and talked about it. He would never talk about it. So what are you guys' thoughts on all that?
Well, when you think that 3 players stand out having undergone the most pressure in baseball history for a period of time, number one, we'd have to say is Jackie Robinson, because it carried over onto the field with Jackie Robinson. He gets spiked, knocked down. They throw at his head. There was Roger Maris the year he was trying to break Babe Ruth's record, but that was carrying on through the year. But just think with Hank Aaron. He was 1 home run short, and it was the off season. He had to watch his back during the off season and have all that pressure, read all that hate mail, have all that anxiety. I mean, and he could do nothing about it because he had to wait for the next season to begin, and it was inevitable he was going to break the record. He's getting all these death threats, and he always kept his dignity, Hank Aaron. I like to think a lot of times I use this as a measuring stick. It's completely imaginary. If I had to take a cross-country car ride and hang out with any of these personalities, I don't know, whose company would I enjoy? I would enjoy Hank Aaron's company. I just know it. Soft-spoken, plain, honest, good sense of humor, easygoing. I would have enjoyed being with him. That was the type of guy he was. And he was popular with his teammates. He once did get into a scuffle with one of his other teammates, Rico Cardi, but they laughed it off afterwards. And I remember when I was a little kid, I saw Hank Aaron play with the Braves at Shea Stadium. But I remember I never got to be close enough to Hank Aaron to ask for an autograph. But I remember one of the pitchers on the Braves, I'm not going to say his name, I asked for his autograph, and his response was much less than polite, to a little kid, much less than polite, okay? And you couldn't, but Hank Aaron was never that way. I mean, with all the pressure he was under, he never lost it with fans and so on. The only time he was ever a little bit edgy was when he was in the peak of his career and they were comparing Willie Mays to him. And he would say, well, what can Willie do that I can't do? And he didn't like, his competitive nature didn't like the idea of them putting Willie Mays ahead of him, which astonished me when Hank Aaron was retired. His ego was on the shelf. He didn't care at all if anyone said Willie Mays was a better player than him. He was interviewed once, and he was asked, who was a better player, you or Willie Mays? He said, I was a better hitter, but Willie was a better all-around player. And what a classy answer, because Hank Aaron was a terrific all-around player.
Yeah.
I mean, he had no weaknesses. He ran the bases really well, was quick, an excellent glove, excellent arm. Okay. I mean, he's one of those players you just couldn't find a weakness in. And if we had an imaginary draft from all the players from 1950, let's say, till now, and let's say the Yankees will go number 1, and we'd have no idea who they were picking. We'd be speculating, having fun, and it would be a surprise whoever they took. And we were told with the number 1 draft pick, the Yankees take right fielder Hank Aaron. After being stunned a couple of minutes, we'd nod our heads. Hey, listen, we got our right field in the next 20 years, impact play, and we go like that.
Yeah. So Doc, on all that, on the the racism, all that mail he got. I mean, the post office actually gave him a badge because he was next to politicians. He got the most amount of mail for that year. Can you imagine? I mean, the going to work, which it is for them, and worried about losing your life. I mean, that's incredible.
It's absolutely incredible. I think actually. The Hank Aaron chase was probably one of the first things in sports that I remember as a little kid, that whole Hank Aaron chasing Babe Ruth. I didn't know anything about all it was, but I do remember getting a book as a little kid in elementary school that talked all about Hank Aaron and Babe Ruth and how they chased each other. And speaking of books, this would be a great book that somebody I wish had sat down with Hank Aaron and written, and it's what you're sort of been talking about. At the end of that 1973 season, he ended up one home run shy, and then he spent that entire winter. I mean, we look at the off season as fans and say, "Oh my God, it's so long." And back then, it was even longer. Spring training was shorter, and he was still on the Braves back then. The Braves weren't in the playoffs. And so it was basically the whole month of October, probably until April. The season started a little later too. So what must that have been like for Hank Aaron for all those months to wait it out, to finally have the chance to do, as Jack said, what was inevitable, but that he still had to do? And what kind of pressure was he under? With his family life, with his community, with the death threats, with all of the hype and everything that was surrounding it, and he had to just stay above the fray, focus on trying to play baseball, and then he goes out and he hits the home run, and does what he's supposed to do. But I would have loved somebody to have written a book about the baseball player Hank Aaron during the greatest, most stressful, most different offseason that he would have ever had to face, or anybody has ever had to face. I don't think any player in any sports ever had an offseason like Hank Aaron had to withstand before he tied and broke that record.
I got to tell you something, though. Hank Aaron did have a wonderful relationship with the Atlanta Brave fans, even though it was the Deep South. Yeah. It wasn't the Atlanta Brave fans. It was fans, bigots around the country, okay? Because case in point, when Hank Aaron had 713 homers, he did not want to play in Cincinnati because he wanted to hit the go-ahead homer, tie Babe Ruth, and pass him in front of his home fans in Atlanta. And there was a big dispute, and Commissioner Bowie Kuhn stepped in, and he made the Braves play Aaron in Cincinnati. He wouldn't allow them to sit him down because he said it was in the best interests of the game. Aaron tied the record there, and then he had something like one at-bat in Cincinnati. After that, they kind of held him back. And I remember Dick Young, the columnist of the New York Daily News, who had a lot of influence, he criticized Commissioner Bowie Kuhn because Bowie Kuhn wouldn't attend the game in Cincinnati because he was going to get booed after that. And he said, the commissioner had a big game in Cleveland to go to. So Hank Aaron was you kind of wonder whether Hank Aaron had enthusiasm to hit 715 in Cincinnati. He came up, I think, one time after because he really wanted to hit it in Atlanta, and he did. And remember when he rounded second base, guys, on homer 715? 2 kids come from the stands. Where the heck's security? With everything going on in Hank Aaron's life, you figure law enforcement's going to be on top of that?
That was a different time, right?
Could you imagine had Hank Aaron gotten shot then, that imagine those threats were genuine? Imagine that he got shot rounding second base. Do you know that would be played over and over today?
Oh, that would be horrific.
Oh, that would never be lived down.
So now on April 8th, 1974, Aaron breaks Ruth's record off the Dodgers pitcher Al Downing. Mm-hmm. And in 1976, July 20th, Hank Aaron hits his 755th home run. He had, as Doc mentioned, and Jack has mentioned too, he had driven over 100 RBIs in 15 years, 13 in a row, still a Major League Baseball record today. So I don't know what else we could say about Hank Aaron unless we met him personally. But I believe that, if there was a Mount Rushmore, a top 4, in my opinion anyway, my educated opinion, that Hank Aaron would be one of those 4, not only for the statistics and how he did it and when he did it and the accomplishments he had over his career anyway. I can't think of no one else besides.
Shout out, Mac. Let's give some kudos to the Negro Leagues. Hank Aaron started there. So think of
him and Willie Mays
players there he competed with, who would have done some amazing things on the major league level had they been given the opportunity.
That's very true, Jack. And you know the Willie Mays. A lot of great players started there, including Willie Mays, and as you mentioned, Jackie Robinson also. So they all started there. So next, guys, we're up with our. Yes, sir. It's the New York Yankees poll question, guys. Every week, assistant producer Linda posts in 3 different Yankee groups, and we try to have a question to see where the fans stand on their thoughts on Yankees and history, current stuff like this. So the question that Linda posted in there is, if the Yankees were to make a serious run this year at the World Series, what first would they need to improve? So there's 3 different things that she posted that they would have to improve, and they had to pick one. And of course, you get comments all 3 and all that stuff, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for what they would actually have to improve to make the World Series this year. So the first was the starting pitching ERA was 4.35 last year. Of course, that would have to drop for the Yankees to have a legitimate chance to make the World Series. The team's batting average was only 245. That would have to definitely come up a few points for the Yankees to make a shot, a good legitimate run at the World Series. And the third one, believe it or not, was their defense. They average 0.76 errors per game, almost 1 error per game, guys. That was 29th out of 30 teams. So that was the three choices they had. And before we get to the poll results, I want to ask each one of you what you think they need to improve. The single thing now, not all 3, not 2 of them, just one that would help them make it to the World Series this year. And Doc, let's start with you this time.
All right, thank you. One of the things that I noticed since Aaron Boone took over, and I've written about this extensively, is the fact that the Yankees play sloppy baseball. If you go back to, and I think we're going to talk about Joe Torre and Casey Stengel, but if you go back to the famous Derek Jeter flip play, right, and everybody was amazed that he was where he was when that play happened, and he said, it wasn't even that remarkable. We went over this all the time in spring training. It was just one of the things that we did. And, you know, when you look at certain teams and you see what the difference is between what makes them great or what makes them very good, the Yankees have a ton of talent. But what is one of the things that might be preventing them from becoming great is the fact that they do not play smart, fundamental baseball. If you watch their games daily and you really look at what's happening, there's players throwing to the wrong base. There's players out of position. There's runners who don't take the extra base when they should and take the extra base when they shouldn't. We all know about Gary Sanchez's problems behind the plate defensively. And this sort of goes back to and there's you can't complain about them re-signing DJ LeMahieu. They got a great player at a great price. But what that does is it does force Gleyber Torres to play shortstop, where he's probably not going to fulfill his greatness as well as he could as a second baseman. So in order to improve second base and keep a great player there and DJ LeMahieu, you're going to have to take your younger player, Gleyber Torres, and put him at shortstop. So the thing that I wish the Yankees would do to get to the point is focus on the fundamentals and focus on defense and really doing a great job there. The Yankees don't have a great defensive team. Luke Voigt's not great. Gleyber Torres isn't great. I think Gio Urshela is. I think DJ LeMahieu is. I don't think either of their catchers is really exceptional defensively. Aaron Hicks is a good center fielder. I'm not sure about Clint Frazier. And, Aaron Judge is a very good defensive player when he's there. but he misses so much time that the Yankees have a big drop off there when he's not playing. So I would say the obvious answer on that would be starting pitching. But if it were me, I think I would love to see the Yankees just focus on the fundamentals and defense.
You know, I was going to play devil's advocate. I thought Doc was going to say another starting pitcher because that's the most obvious thing that they need first and foremost. But I was going to mention Gleyber Torres in particular. What's ironic, Gleyber Torres was a shortstop in the Cub farm system. I thought that was his natural position. They moved him only to second base because the Yankees had Didi Gregorius at the time. So when they moved Gleyber Torres back to shortstop, I thought that's where he's going to be most comfortable. He was going to be outstanding there, but instead he was a liability. Can he play shortstop? I question that. And if he doesn't improve at shortstop, just think of this on the field at the same time. Gary Sanchez's catches had his difficulties. Luke Voigt at first base, even though he's improved a little, he's far from a Gold Glove first baseman. Then you have Gleyber Torres at shortstop and Clint Frazier. I'd like to know who the fools are who made him a top 3 Gold Glove candidate. I mean, it makes a mockery of the Golden Gloves for them to have done that. But he was a big liability a good part of last year. When he came back from the minors, he was stable. That's about he was stable. I can't say he was a liability when he came back, but let's see how he is moving forward. So and like you said, Mac, I didn't know that stat that you said. 29th out of 30 teams defensively they rated. I mean, I shouldn't be shocked about it, but when you hear that number, I mean, that's not a formula that makes you comfortable that they could take a series, a run at the World Series, with a stat like that.
Yeah, and guys, I'm in agreement with you. I mean, of course we need another starting pitcher. Of course we got to hit the ball better. But that's human. That's something that we want to get from each player to add to something in a bigger way. But when it comes to defense, that's all about drills. That's all about practice. That's all about backing up. That's all about the different ways that a ball. If you have a liability at catcher who can't stop the ball from getting by him every game, or you have a first baseman that doesn't know how to stretch correctly and make those big plays that you need to get out of innings, and you have a young superstar in Torres that for some reason can't play shortstop when that's where I was just going to bring that up, where that's where he was playing in the minors and he was good at second base. I mean, how are you going to win? You've got to be able to do the things basically that any team should be able to do. I don't care how great your hitters are or how great your pitching is. So I would agree with all three of you that, the key to the Yankees maybe making a real run at the World Series is they got to tighten up the things they can tighten up as a team. And if they can't do that, I don't care if they bet 300. We saw the Mets bat over 300 last year, and they didn't make the World Series. And we saw some pitching teams that pitched about 3 that didn't make the World Series. So I agree with all three of you. I think that's the major thing that the Yankees can do to give themselves a shot at the World Series without depending on independent performances. Of course, the poll question was pitching. That was the answer. They've got to bring the pitching, the ERA down. And second was hitting, believe it or not. And the defense finished a distant third. So to me, it's interesting always to see what fans look at, because fans want to see a pitcher striking out 16 batters, and they want to see a team hitting home runs and driving in runs. When if you look at the team of the Yankees of the 90s, they had an excellent defensive team, and even under Stengel, they had a good defensive team, and that's why, guys, I think that they won so many World Series to go along with the other thing.
Oh, what we didn't mention on the show, and it just took place a couple of days ago. AJ Happ went to the Minnesota Twins on a 1-year deal.
Thank you.
And the Yankees couldn't re-sign him. It was for $8 million for 1 year. I'm sure had the Yankees offered $10 million for 1 year, he'd be back. So obviously the Yankees lost a certain amount of faith in Happ, but he did finish the year very well last year, but he performed poorly, when he was in the playoffs.
Hey, listen, I call him Hapless because, I mean, he's a good fourth starter, Jack, but he's not, or maybe fifth. It may be a
That's
long
good
reliever.
enough. You fill up the rotation. If he's a good fourth starter.
Give,
You want him.
give,
but
give the young kid a
Dylan
shot. Give a
Brooks.
young kid a shot. I mean, but anyway, that's just my personal opinion. That doesn't
Let me ask a question based upon that poll question. Sort of a dichotomy type of question. What emotion is stronger? Your emotion when a team wins a game, the euphoria you feel when they win a game on a walk-off homer, or the great disappointment you feel when they lose a game because of an error?
Yeah.
I think that depression you feel like we got the game and he dropped the ball. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That I think that feels worse. That's a stronger emotion than the euphoria you get when a team wins with a walk-off homer. We look at the walk-off homer and we sort of forget the sad stuff, but defense plays such a big role in baseball and it's overlooked sometimes, except when it becomes very apparent.
No, the big leaguers are so good. It's so rare that they're going to make like an obvious error, just drop an easy ball. I mean, remember when the Yankees beat the Mets? A-Rod
Luis Castillo, yep.
The second base, and he bangs his bat that he made the last out of the game, and then the ball gets dropped, and a moment later the Yankee players are mobbing A-Rod, So
yeah, true, but
funny.
True, but we'll never forget what happened with Buckner in the Red Sox Mets World Series, and we don't forget what the play Jeter made. That's up there in the highlights. Yeah. If you're looking at any plays, the video is still being played everywhere. And again, that era, and Bill Buckner was a great first baseman, but that one error, I mean, that haunted him for the rest of his life.
Very unfairly, and I think, it's a play he should have made, but it wasn't exactly a routine play. He had to move his feet a little bit to get to the ball. And two elements involved. Mookie Wilson may have beaten him to the bag because Buckner was an older, broken down player. Mookie Wilson was lightning fast. Mookie Wilson might have beaten him to the bag. Do I think he would have? My guess would be no, but he might have done it. And also, had Buckner successfully made the play, beaten Mookie Wilson to the base, the game would have been tied. The Mets might still have won. Okay? And number three, Buckner really should not have been out there. For defensive purposes, the Red Sox manager, John McNamara, shouldn't have had him out there. But reportedly, he wanted Buckner on the field to celebrate the final out of the World Series because he was such a great player for his career. That was a man, Bill Buckner, who had over 2,700 lifetime hits. You could make an argument for Bill Buckner that he was a Hall of Fame. I think he was a little short, but you can make an argument that he was the same way you can make it for a player like a Johnny Damon.
Well, to go back to Hank Aaron with Bill Buckner for a minute, I read the home run, the center fielder. Now his name was Bill Buckner. I don't think it was the same one, but it was just funny to see Bill Buckner was a center fielder who watched the ball go over his head into the bullpen, and of course, I that may or may not be Bill Buckner we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I think it is.
But I saw the name and it's like, wow, there's another place that Bill Buckner was in effect on a losing end of something. So if that
Billy Buck played for the 1974 Dodgers.
Yeah.
So there you go. So that was interesting too. So Jack, we're going to start our debate as we're going to start out. So we're going to start out, Jack, with a little banjo twang there for you. We're going to debate right now who was the better manager for the Yankees, Casey Stengel or Joe Torre. And you're up first, my friend.
Different eras, different times. Casey Stengel was a personality that was bigger than baseball. He was funny. If I had to tell you the most charismatic manager in the history of baseball, in all due respect to Tommy Lasorda, who recently passed away, you'd have to go with Casey Stengel. Casey Stengel could out-talk anyone. When they had him in front of a Senate hearing about baseball, I mean, he dazzled the Senate. And then when he got done, the thought was, what the heck was he talking about? And then Mickey Mantle said when he followed, he had to testify. He said, yeah, I agree with everything Casey said, not having any idea what Casey was talking about. But Casey Stengel managed the Yankees to 5 World Series in a row, 1949 through 1953. Then the one year they didn't win it, 1954, they won more games that year than all the years they won the World Series. They won 103 games, but the Cleveland Indians were a juggernaut with 111 wins that year. Then Casey won a couple of more World Series, and he managed through 1960. To say he was a push-button manager, that maybe that would be a little unfair. But when you take all these great teams in baseball, I hate to say it, but there are a lot of guys who could win with those teams, with great teams, in the sport of baseball, that is. I know it's more than just riding in a lineup. You have to make certain moves, and the manager absolutely can make a difference and make a big difference. But Casey Stengel didn't really relate to his players the way Joe Torre did. Okay, Joe Torre was in general loved by his players, and I'm not counting guys like Gary Sheffield and Kenny Lofton, who were complainers at other places outside of New York and who didn't play for Joe Torre as long as a Bernie Williams who loved Joe Torre. Derek Jeter, Joe Torre's in his inner circle today. Derek Jeter has about 4 people in his inner circle today, and Joe Torre is one of them. He still calls him Mr. T. He absolutely loves Joe Torre. Joe Torre also had to go through divisional rounds. Casey Stengel didn't have to. You won the American League pennant. You automatically got to the World Series. And let's be honest, when Casey Stengel managed, the competitive balance wasn't as great as when Joe Torre managed, okay? It was harder to get to the World Series. Still, Joe Torre, they did win 4 World Series in 5 years. He made the playoffs, Joe Torre. All 12 years he managed the Yankees. And keep this in mind, as soon as he left the Yankees as manager, he was signed by the LA Dodgers. And there had been talk before that, well, Joe Torre was a failure as a manager till he got to the Yankees, because he managed at St. Louis, Atlanta, who he got to the playoffs, Atlanta one year, the Mets, who weren't good. So people said the only reason he won, Joe Torre, because he had all this talent with the Yankees. But in 2008, 2009, he took the Dodgers to the championship series both years. He nearly got them to the World Series. And that showed that Joe Torre really was a good manager. He didn't get too caught up in analytics, and he had to deal with George Steinbrenner. If Casey thought George Weiss was difficult as the Yankee owner, no one compared to George Steinbrenner to deal with him. And man, that was a juggling act, and he managed to do it. Who lasts with George Steinbrenner all those years? I mean, certainly Billy Martin, who was a great manager, couldn't. So I'd say between the two, I couldn't imagine Joe Torre calling in Joe DiMaggio in his office saying, you're playing first base whether you like it or not. Imagine doing that to Joe DiMaggio. When people would talk about Derek Jeter playing center field, Joe Torre never made the move. But could you imagine him calling Jeter in his office saying, Derek, you're playing center field whether you like it or not? Also with Phil Rizzuto, one of the most beloved Yankees, he calls him into his office and he says, look, I have to cut someone from the team. Which of these names do you think should be cut? And Rizzuto can't sell out a teammate. Rizzuto says, no, keep him until they got to Rizzuto's name. And then Casey showed him the door. I mean, come on. I mean, Joe Torre was the better manager for his time, I think, than Casey was in his. And yeah, that's just and I've stated my case.
Well, Jack, you say it's more competitive than it was back then. I would disagree with that. There's more chance of you with the wild card teams and the way the playoffs are set up, where it's easier to get into the playoffs, into the World Series than it used to be. You had to win your division. You had to win the pennant, and you had to play 162 games to get there. So I don't agree with that at all. I believe that if you look, on direct decisions during games is where I look. I look as a manager who manages a team during the games, who is an innovator. Joe Torre was not an innovator, Jack. Joe Torre was pretty much, I'm going to be a nice guy and let you guys do your thing. And he did have a lot of talent, just as Casey Stengel did. Casey won 9 World Series championships, Jack. Public speaking, he was funny, as you said. But when it came to baseball, as a great innovator and strategist, Stengel easily beats Torre. Stengel made famous platooning, Jack, where he brought in lefties against righties and righties against lefties. And after blowing leads in 2 games with this strategy, he gave a locker room speech, Jack. So this wasn't a public speech, but Curt Gowdy was there. And he kind of gave him a talking to about what they were doing and what they had to do. And the Yankees went out and won 13 out of the next 14 games. Gowdy said the meeting was a turning point of the season. Casey Stengel used relief pitchers more than any other manager in baseball at the time, Jack. He brought in Joe Page off after Allie Reynolds gave up, some runs, and the Yankees came back to win in the first game of the pennant. And then in the second game of the pennant versus the Red Sox, after the Yankees jumped out to a 5-0 lead, the starting pitcher gave up 3 runs. And Stengel brings in Via Raschi to save the game after Boston scores those 3 runs in the 9th. Managers didn't really do that back then, Jack. They stuck with their starting pitcher throughout the whole game. In Game 4 of the World Series, Stengel breaks the Major League rules, comes out of the dugout and shouts to Yogi Berra to throw the ball to second. Well, Yogi Berra did that, and he threw out Pee Wee Reese trying to steal. He was later reprimanded by the commish, Hap Chandler. He benched Yankees superstar Joe DiMaggio. You're right. He did do that. Joe DiMaggio was going through a slump, and Joe DiMaggio was getting tired. And after he did bench him, guess what? Joe DiMaggio came back and batted .373, Jack. So a pretty good move, I think. He moved legend Mickey Mantle from shortstop to center fielder, seeing that Mickey Mantle was going to be a great outfielder. And, of course, he had Phil Rizzuto there. So why have Mantle try to beat out Phil Rizzuto when you had one of the best bunters and base runners in the game? So something Joe Torre wouldn't do. He wouldn't move Derek Jeter to center field. Of course he wouldn't. Derek Jeter was a center fielder. Joe Torre didn't like to create waves, and that was very smart. I'm not taking nothing away from Joe Torre. He was a great manager. But to compare him to Stengel, there's no comparison, Jack. He and Weiss even started an instructional school for rookies and young players. And all the teams in the Major League complained about it. Here go the Yankees. They're using their money. And they complained and complained and complained. And guess what? Not only did that instructional school survive, but all the teams in baseball started using instructional schools. So when we think of Casey Stengel, we think of 9 World Series, a great team, yes. But, you could say the same thing about Torre with Torre, Williams, Posada, Pettit, Martinez, O'Neill, Boone, Wells, Clemens. I mean, that starting pitching staff is unbelievable and the greatest reliever in baseball history, Jack. So when you look at the two together, who was more innovative? Who's the one that started things? Who was the best fielder manager? It was Stengel by far. And he had to deal with that Joe DiMaggio personality, who was a dominating superstar back then. He was bigger than Derek Jeter, Jack. He was bigger than any Yankee out there, and he had to deal with that huge personality of Joe
Thank
DiMaggio.
you. He had Joe DiMaggio for a little while. He had Mickey Mantle. Joe Torre never had a player the caliber of Mickey Mantle.
And they never had the
Due
pitcher
respect.
the caliber of Pedro Martinez, Jack. Not close.
Casey Stengel, I notice you leave out the New York Mets. I mentioned Joe Torre with other teams. I put out his whole body of work.
Right.
He managed the worst team in baseball history. Their manager was Casey Stengel. And Casey Stengel, after not winning the World Series for 2 years in a row in 59 and 60, as soon as Stengel left, the Yankees won the World Series the next 2 years. In the 1961 team, the first year that Stengel left, you can make an argument that they were the greatest team of all time. And why he fought?
Well,
chairman of the
Jack.
board.
Well, Jack.
He
Who
was
had
not a Casey Stengel
who
fan. He liked him
who
personally.
who
He
had
felt
the
Stengel
what team?
misused him.
What team had the most wins in Yankee history, Jack? Which team had the most wins? With the talent they had at the '98 Yankees team. So, I mean, if you want to say that he had great players,
Well, the Yankee, yeah, the
so did
Yankee
Torrey.
did, right?
So did
98
Torrey. Torrey had one of the greatest. Tito Martinez, an unbelievable first baseman he had under his reign. He had Paul O'Neill, one of the greatest warriors in baseball history. He had one of the greatest pitching staff together at one time. You could say Whitey Ford. I can hit you with Roger Clemens. I can say
talk
Tony
Yogi
Stone. I
Berra,
can say,
maybe the greatest catcher ever that Stengel had.
well, it could be. It could be. Yogi Berra is one of the greatest catchers of all time. Jorge Posada wasn't no joke, Jack. He was one of the best offensive
But
catchers
they
of all time.
swore. But the difference is the Yankee players like Posada swore by Joe Torre.
And that's
to help him grow
and
as a
so did-
player and as a man.
so did Mickey Mantle swear by Casey Stengel, Jack.
Mickey Mantle said Ralph Houck was the best manager.
He might have said
played
that.
for.
He might have said that.
The guy who followed Casey Stengel.
He might have said that, but at the time when he was on the team, Jack, Casey Stengel loved. Mickey Mantle loved Casey Stengel, and he even went to the Senate committee hearings to back him up on the monopoly of baseball.
I don't know whether he loved Casey Stengel.
Well,
I think that's an exaggeration. He maybe was okay with Casey, but let's hear what Doc has to say.
Go ahead, Doc. What do you got to say?
Well, one guy who definitely loved Casey was Billy Martin, right?
Oh,
he was
yeah.
Casey's
Yeah.
boy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think this is one of those arguments that we could have probably forever, because the eras were so different. Both had superstar players. Both had a history of not being successful managers before they came to the Yankees. Both then had an unbelievable string of success with the Yankees. Everybody talks about the fact that Joe Torre had to handle George Steinbrenner. But the George Steinbrenner of the 90s and the 2000s was a different George Steinbrenner than the Steinbrenner of the 70s and the 80s. And I've made the argument that a lot of people like to look at the Yankees today and they say, like, well, Steinbrenner almost traded Derek Jeter and Steinbrenner almost traded Andy Pettitte. Right, but he didn't. And they like to say, like, well, he would trade Aaron Judge away, or he would trade Gleyber Torres. He would have made that trade with the Reds. No, I don't think he would have. I think the one thing about George Steinbrenner that's forgotten is after he was suspended that second time, he actually changed his approach. The team got good while he was suspended, and he really left the day-to-day operation to baseball people and just used his money to enhance the team. Now, Casey Stengel didn't have an owner that did that, but Casey Stengel had an owner that used the Kansas City A's and the Baltimore Orioles as their own farm teams, and would pull players from those teams with making these crazy trades to enhance the Yankees. You can argue that the Yankees of the modern day made it to all those playoffs, and Casey Stengel didn't. But then again, as Mac was saying, if there was a wild card, the Yankees probably would have made the playoffs in 1954, and maybe then in a short series they could have beaten the Cleveland Indians and made it to another World Series. Maybe they could have won 6 in a row. You want to go back to Hank Aaron? It was Hank Aaron who beat the Yankees in the 57 World Series. He had a great World Series that year. So I'm gonna punt on this one. I'm gonna say they were both great, and I'm not willing to say one was better. I do say Mac is right that Casey was definitely more innovative, and if we want to pick up on something with Joe Torre and look back on history, I think everybody would agree that A-Rod was the better shortstop when the Yankees got him. And A-Rod said, I'll go to third base. He wanted to be a Yankee and obviously wanted to get out of Texas. But I wonder what would have happened if Jeter had been willing to move. And I don't know you hear different stories about all that he said, I would refuse to move off a shortstop. What would have happened if Torre said, look, we can get the greatest shortstop in the game right now. You've got to move. How would that have played out? That's something that could be interesting if it had happened.
Or Jeter could have moved to third base.
Yeah. What if you just made that switch? Jeter goes to third.
Came up in conversation because I think the way Alex explained it and Brian Cashman, they talked about it when they met at the banquet, and to make it work, Alex said he'd be willing to go to third in the beginning, and it was basically
Correct.
close. I want to correct you on one thing. In all due respect to the great Hank Aaron, who obviously we all have nothing but glowing things to say about, who had a wonderful 1957 World Series. It was Lou Burdett who won 3 games.
Yeah, Lou Burdett won 3.
Really, I mean, he was the main guy. Hank Aaron, you could say, I don't know about the other guys, the stats was maybe the main position player for the Braves, who maybe had the biggest impact for them, in beating the Yankees. But Lou Burdett's 3 victories were, historic.
Great information, guys. Great
the Yankees
information.
returned the favor in 1958. They were down 3-1, coming back, winning.
And they beat the Braves. And that was Casey's last World Series.
Yeah.
And he used relief pitchers too. So anyway, guys, we got Jack, give me a second. Jack, give me a second. Doc, can you stick around through the break here? We're going to take a quick 3-minute break and be right back. Get ready to go, and we'll be back with our golfers, athletes. And can you stick through the break, or you got to go?
I'll stick through that argument, but I won't have much to offer because.
That's okay. I mean, hey, listen, your opinion is good as mine.
Common sense, you'll get into it. You'll see.
Well, like I said, Jack picks first, but that's okay. I can make the argument. So, guys, we're going to take our quick, about 3-4 minute break. We'll be right back after these messages. That'll be me, Jack Hirsch, and the great Dr. Paul Semendinger. So please stick around.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about our new friend. I wonder if there's been any drinking going on. Alcohol at her age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask you, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family, and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma. I love you too.
Okay, how about tasting this stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Info Line. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
If you talk and they will hear you every single time.
Oh, we're getting killed.
Yeah, well, Kyle's not here.
How come?
Kicked off the team. Didn't Tim tell you? Kyle and some other kids got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. Zero tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's a first offense, right?
That we know of. But why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I've made it clear to Matt, that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try it at this age, so.
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's going to be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink, how's he going to know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admit it, Bill, but they hear more than you think.
Talk. They hear you. For more information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show. We're on live 8 to 10 a.m. Wednesday through Sunday. This is our debate show that me and Jack have every week. Join in next week. We'll be debating the history of baseball and football and hockey and every other sport you can think of. We might even do cricket one time, Jack. Here today we have our weekly guest, Dr. Paul Semendinger, who he is the founder of the great Yankees blog, starts spreading the news, also award-winning author with his book, Scattering the Ashes. A great book, guys. I suggest you all, if you haven't look it up and check it out. I really enjoyed reading it, and you will too. So we're getting back to the debate, Jack, and we're going to talk about one of the debate questions that you sent me was, are golfers athletes, Jack? And you know how I feel about golf. I feel golf is not a sport. It's a competition, a skill competition. And the reason why it's not a sport, in my educated opinion, I would
You're
say
saying it's not a sport?
It's not a sport. And the reason why it's not a sport is because nobody is stopping you from scoring, Jack. It's all about you. It's a competition, like track and field, like gymnastics, like any other competition, Jack.
Mac, let me cut in. The question is, are golfers athletes?
Right.
That's the question.
But what I'm saying is you kind of put me in a spot here because you know how I feel about golf. But the question is, as you said, are golfers athletes? And at first, if you asked me this in the beginning of our shows, I would have said no. But I started looking at other sports, and you would agree, I would think, Jack, that football players are athletes, right? And that baseball players are athletes. And you would say that boxers are probably the greatest athletes in the world. So I was thinking about it, and I went to baseball, and first thing that popped into my head were pitchers. And I remember Louis Tiant and what he looked like and how out of shape he was when he pitched. And that, he wasn't the greatest fielder in the world. And of course, with the DH, he didn't have to bat, so he didn't have to run the bases. And then I went to David Wells, and I thought, well, David Wells was a great pitcher. But if you asked him to hit the ball and run the bases, he probably couldn't do it as well as most. And I even took a look, at Poppy. Poppy was a great hitter, right? Poppy was a great hitter, a so-so first baseman. And, you wouldn't put him as a pinch runner at any time, I'm sure of that. And you wouldn't start him probably at first base. So to say that these guys are athletes, it's questionable. And then I went to football, and I thought about, let's see, Jack Dempsey. Not Jack Dempsey, that's a boxer. Dempsey, I'm trying to remember his first name. Jack, help me out.
Tom. Get to the point, Mac.
I want you to help me out in my argument here, Jack, against you. So Tom Dempsey not only was overweight, had half a foot, but, I don't think you would put him at middle linebacker. Mark Mosley, MVP of the league, MVP, the leading scorer back then, kicked field goals, and boy, was he chubby. And then, then I went to boxing. I even went to boxing, Jack, your sport, the one you cover. And I thought about a guy named Butterbean. I think that's his name. And I looked at him and I said, man, can he really run a mile? Never mind 5 or 10 miles. I said, nah, he couldn't do that. So to say he's an athlete, I would say, well, probably not. So as I go through and I think about Tiger Woods, and yeah, there are some out-of-shape golfers that are a little overweight, maybe thinly built, and maybe a little shorter than most. And I compared some of these guys to actual sports where they're hitting each other or they're asking them to play a sport where they should be athletes, and some of them are not. I look at Tiger Woods and some of the new golfers, and they work out. You can tell they work out and that they do a regiment when they golf. Well, maybe there are some athletes there, Jack. Maybe Tiger Woods could play baseball. Maybe some of these new golfers could kick a football. Maybe they could pitch a baseball. I don't know. But to say that they are not athletes in general, I don't know anymore.
Within their sport, that's all I'm talking about.
No, you said, are they athletes, Jack?
That means anyone who plays golf, you're going to say is not an athlete. I would never say that.
Well, that's what you said.
A ton of people play golf in society, okay? A lot of professional athletes in other sports play golf. Obviously, they're great athletes, but the golfers themselves, what they're doing within their sport They're not an athlete. They're not performing athletic feats within their sport. Golf is about recreation. It's a wonderful game. If you have a sport where 60-year-old men can beat the greatest 25-year-old athletes in other sports and beat them handily, easily, that's not an athletic thing. Okay, not at all. It's a skill thing. Listen, these golfers, they're too lazy to even carry their own clubs. They have a caddy. They go 18 holes in the golf course. They're riding in the cart from hole to hole. What kind of athletes are these? An athlete is asked to dig down deep in whatever the sport is. Baseball, a guy wants to stretch a double into a triple. He's digging down deep with all he has to slide into third. Golfers never have to dig down deep. Heck, they don't even want any noise when they're hitting the ball. If they hear a whisper, they stop and they'll give you a glare.
I've seen tennis players do that, Jack. I've seen tennis players. Yes, I've seen tennis players do that too, Jack. Go ahead.
They only play in nice weather.
Yes.
I mean, if there's a little wind, they pack it in for the day. Athletes readjust.
That's not true.
Golfers never readjust.
That's not true.
Okay? They need a caddy to tell them what club to use. Athletes figure things out. The caddy has to say, no, I think you should use so-and-so. Can you imagine a ball player going to the bat? Boy, what bat do you think I should use? Should I use 32 or 34 ounces with this pitcher? Imagine him conferring with the bat boy the way golfers do with the caddies. And it's a wonderful game, golf. I mean, I played miniature golf when I was a kid. I didn't play golf after. It's a wonderful game. It's good for relaxation, but it has nothing to do with athletic skill. It's a skill sport. Chess is a skill sport. I'm not going to call chess players athletes. I mean, golfers basically put the ball down. They take one swing of the ball. They don't have to adjust to someone else. Like when they hit a ball, they don't have to figure out what a pitcher's doing like in baseball. They don't have a defense coming at them. It's pretty one-dimensional. I mean, if I'm going to call them athletes, I got to call bowlers athletes, too. It's a great skill game. I have tremendous respect for golfers and bowlers, too. But I wouldn't call them athletes compared to the other sports.
Well, again, just before Doc gets in here, I've seen pitchers take the relief pitchers to the mound. I've also seen, as you stated about the caddy, pitchers do confer with their pitching coach, don't they, Jack? And batters do consult with their batting coach. And as I said, I sure know that Poppy wouldn't be digging for third, and that if Louis Tiant was pinch running, he wouldn't be digging for third. In fact, they go up there and they take them out if they get on base for the most part, Jack, because they can't run the bases. So I agree that golfing is not a sport. I said that when we first started, but I don't agree necessarily that some sporting teams that are sports that are competitive are all athletes, as I mentioned about Mark Mosley, as I mentioned about punters, as I mentioned about pitchers. They're not all athletes, Jack.
They are the kickers. They kick off. The play continues. They might be in on the tackle.
They might be.
They have to run down if the kick returner gets by the first line.
I agree.
Running in the open field.
And you see what they do, Jack.
Might have to make the tackle, and we've seen that a lot.
Yes, we have, Jack. But again, you're saying something that happens very rarely, and golfers do adjust, Jack. I've seen him play in the rain. I've seen him play in the wind, not in the snow, because I don't think they golf in the snow. Maybe they do. I'm not sure. I don't follow golf that much. So anyway, Jack, the premise I would have agreed with you when the show started way back when a few months ago. But, I don't know. I think maybe we don't give him enough credit. What do you think, Doc?
I don't think Mark Mosley was involved in kickoffs. If we go back to that Redskin team all those years ago, I think they had the punter do the kickoffs. I think Mosley just kicked field goals straight on, too, if you remember.
Yeah.
I think he was the last great straight-on kicker. I think when we're talking about professional athletes, I don't think you can say that any of the top golfers in the world aren't athletes. They work out. They're definitely athletes. I understand what we're all saying here. And, was Luis Tiant in great athletic shape at the end of his career, or Mickey Lolich or David Wells or
CC Sabathia, Doc.
CC Sabathia, even George Foreman, at the end of his when he made his big comeback. I mean, these guys weren't in great physical shape, at least to look at them, but they were still performing athletic feats. And I would say that golfers are athletes. I think it's easy to say, and you're right, like nobody's trying to move the ball off their tee and all of that kind of stuff, but they still have to drive the ball a certain amount of yards. They still have to make adjustments on where the ball is. I know they talk to their caddy, and their caddy offers them things, but even the great quarterbacks, how much are the great quarterbacks really designing the plays, or how much is coming to them over the headsets and even the coaches? How much are they being told by what the other people see up in the booth about what's happening on the field before they call each play? So I think all great athletes, all people in sports adapt based upon what other people are seeing. And the caddy is just their personal coach who goes around with them. So I'm going to say a golfer is an athlete.
Okay, Doc. So there, Jack, put that in your pipe and smoke it. So,
well, listen, Mac, you get the best 25-year-old athlete you can find in any sport.
Right.
And I bet I'll get a 70-year-old golfer who's going to beat him in a golf game.
That's a good point too, Jack. It's a good point too. So, Jack, we got up next, and Doc. Hopefully you
won that debate, Mac. I shouldn't be a sore loser.
That's okay, Jack. I think I won both.
Good arguments.
That's just my opinion.
Doc. I'll concede that one.
Okay, so Jack, the third debate is the player who sacrificed his career for the betterment of the team or that situation, however you want to word it. And you're up next, Jack.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, when you look at who sacrificed the most, you have to look at who was the greatest player of all time who sacrificed the most. It's funny, like we were talking about baseball before Babe Ruth. Imagine he didn't turn out to be that great of a right fielder for the Yankees, but they played him there and they didn't want to pitch him. He was a great pitcher. You could say he sacrificed for the team, oddly. But the biggest superstar of all time in sports who sacrificed his own individual stats, his own individual well-being for the good of the team, we'd say was Earl the Pearl Monroe. He was a superstar with the Baltimore Bullets from 1967 to 1971. He was Rookie of the Year. He was all NBA first team with the Bullets. They even mentioned his name in the movie He Got Game. Okay, when they said they kept the shackles on him, wouldn't let him play, wouldn't let him be loose, wouldn't let him be himself out on the court. Guy was so unselfish when he came to the Knicks. This was a guy who was a superstar. They had him coming off the bench to help the team because the Knicks had Walt Clyde Frazier and Dick Barnett in the backcourt, Dave DeBusschere, Bill Bradley, and Willis Reed in the front court. And he accepted his role, Earl Monroe. He was rewarded by winning a world championship with the Knicks. But the big question is, had he stayed with the Bullets? Had he been in his individual role? We would look at him now as just one of the greatest, maybe individual players of all time. He was so good, Earl Monroe. Walt Frazier, when he came to the Knicks, Walt Frazier said, now we have a Rolls-Royce backcourt. He was on a par with Walt Clyde Frazier, yet he deferred to Walt Clyde Frazier. And Jerry Krause, who was the GM of the Chicago Bulls, if you saw that series, The Last Dance, Michael Jordan used to give it to Jerry Krause unmercifully. You know, it was a bit mean-spirited by Jordan, let's face it, but Krause brought some of it on to himself with his personality. But Krause would counter over someone he drafted. He'd say, well, Earl Monroe is better than you. Just the idea he would mention Earl Monroe in the same breath as Jordan and tease him that Earl Monroe was better than you said a lot for how great Earl Monroe was when he was with the Baltimore Bullets. He changed his whole game very unselfishly When he came to the Knicks, he did it in the name of winning, and the Knicks did win an NBA championship with Earl Monroe. Extremely unselfish.
That's a great one, Jack. Before I get to my pick, I want to talk about a player who sacrificed his career, and he did it not just for his team, but for our country. If you want to look at the United States as a team, as they do in Olympics, I'm going to bring up Patrick Tillman of Arizona Cardinals. Tillman was drafted in 1988, an outstanding safety for the Cardinals. He was even named to the All-Pro team by writer Paul Zimmerman. He turned down $2 million deals for the Cardinals, Jack. He turned one down in the beginning because he wanted the Cardinals to be able to go out and get more players. And then he turned down another $3.6 million deal to enlist in the United States Army after the 9/11 attacks and fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was killed by friendly fire. He also won, many medals and awards. The Meritorious Service Medal among them. Back in the 1940s during World War II, a lot of players went into the war or enlisted, but then they had the draft, right? I mean, they might have been drafted anyway if they were single. I don't know how that worked back then. But Tillman didn't make it back home. And let's just not forget how unselfish and patriotic and Patrick Tillman was, not only to, the Cardinals as a great safety, and probably would have gone on to have an outstanding career, because I remember the day that he left, and I remember watching him play, and he was outstanding. And what he did unselfishly. And if you want to think of the United States as a team, like they do in the Olympics, he made a huge sacrifice for the team. But getting back to the debate, my pick is Hacksaw Jack Reynolds, Jack. Now, they gave him that nickname because after he lost the football game, he cut his car in half right in the parking lot. He was a very intense, intimidating middle linebacker for the Los Angeles Rams. And during the playoff run against the Pittsburgh Steelers back in 1980, when he went up to play him in the Super Bowl, he broke his leg, his fibula. And after breaking his leg, most people like that, if you break your tibia or fibula, that's it. They're done for the season. Their career might be over. Well, Jack Reynolds played anyway with his leg in a cast and on splints. And not that he had a great game, but he probably played better than the other middle linebacker would have been. He went on to play for the San Francisco 49ers on 2 Super Bowl teams, but it only lasted 4 years. He was sure not the same as he was when he played and he started for the Rams. So here's a guy who most people would have been out for the game, out for the year. He tapes his leg back up, puts a cast on it, and again, he went to the 49ers after that, but not the way he used to be, Jack. So here's a guy giving everything he can, including a possibility of re-injuring that leg and not being able to walk again. So here's a guy that puts everything aside, and he plays for the team in the playoffs and the Super Bowl, throughout the playoffs and the Super Bowl. And I can't think of anyone who put his career on the line as Jack Reynolds did.
Well, I just want to count that nothing compares to Pat Tillman when you give up your life in service. I'm not going to debate that at all. Nothing compares to that sacrifice. So let's put that completely separate.
Right.
The other example, players playing when they're very hurt, it goes on all the time. It's a sacrifice for the team. It's courageous, but it happens on a constant, basis. All the time. These guys are fierce competitors. They want to get in there in the worst way, and they have to be saved from themselves. Patrick Mahomes, he's going to be allowed to play Sunday. He had a concussion. If it was up to him, he wouldn't even consult with the doctors. He'd be in there playing. That's the way these guys are with the sacrifice.
Very true.
About Pat Tillman, that's separate. I wouldn't compare anything to that type of sacrifice.
Definitely.
Doc?
What do you think, Doc?
Those are two great examples. I was making lists of guys athletes who played through difficult challenges. It was an incomplete list, but I was thinking of Paul O'Neill when he played it in Game 4 of the World Series after his dad had died. I was thinking of Willis Reed playing in those playoffs with the Knicks when he was hurt. Kirk Gibson hitting that big home run in the 1988 World Series. I thought about Kerry Strug. Remember, she had the broken leg and she landed the landing in the Olympics all those years ago. You want to talk about people who sacrificed too? Ted Williams and Jerry Coleman both served in World War II and Korea. And like Sandy Koufax didn't pitch on Yom Kippur in the 1965 World Series because he wanted to sacrifice for his religion because he thought it was the right thing to do, which is admirable and one of those other great moments of sacrifice. So there's so many different types. I don't know enough about hacksaw, and I don't know not much about the basketball. Who is it? Earl Paul Monroe? I forgot who.
Earl Pearl.
No, guys, I think you guys are missing the point of the question. This is sacrificing for the good of the team. We talked before about Jeter at shortstop, and Doc, you mentioned you wondered had he gone to the outfield. Had Jeter gone to center field, he would have been, and I'm not saying he should have. I'm not saying that at all. But that would be sacrificing for the good of the team, thinking, well, maybe A-Rod's a little better at shortstop than I am. And if I go to the outfield, I think this is going to help the team a little bit. Even though I really don't want to do it, it's not going to help me individually, but it'll help the team. I'm talking about stuff like that.
Yeah, but
and it's very hard to find cases.
The premise,
it's very, you have to sit down.
The premise of the debate, Jack. The premise of the debate.
Mac, I want to hear if Doc has one.
You know what? A player who constantly changed his position for the betterment of the team was Pete Rose. You know, he played all over the place. He went when they got Joe Morgan. He went to third base. From second base, he was a player. He moved all around the diamond in order to try to make sure.
But I don't know. That's called. But he wasn't an elite fielder, so it didn't matter that much.
Well, you know, Jack,
an Ozzie Smith.
Well, Jack, you say that, Jack, but we don't know if Earl Pearl Monroe would have had a great career with the Comets as he did with the Knicks because he went to the championship, which to me, you're saying he's sacrificing his career. That is one of the highlights of his career. So for you saying that Jack Reynolds on a broken leg playing through the playoffs is not an unselfish act to help a team and maybe hurt his career. You're saying suppose. Well, wait a minute. Let me finish. So suppose Hacksaw Reynolds re-broke his leg and couldn't walk again. I think that's a heck of a sacrifice. You belittling that, saying, "Well, Earl Pearl, well, he took a different position or took a different role." Well, so has James Harden. Is he sacrificing his career? All I'm saying, Jack, is you're saying that your premise is that, well, he took a back seat to this other person. That happens all the time in sports too, Jack. Even LeBron James and with Miami, even he took a back seat to LeBron James. Did that hurt his career? They won a championship. So they got some kind of payment out of that. So your premise saying, well, I'm saying, well, he took a different position. No. That's not the premise of the debate. The premise of the debate is who made a sacrifice to his career that helped the team out. Yours is correct. I'm not saying
how it turned out is irrelevant. I'll tell one to Doc now that Doc will remember. And I have a feeling this slipped by you, Doc. Not much does.
I'm wondering if we're thinking the same thing. I got one for you. Go on. I want to hear what you have to say
first. To the bullpen.
Guidry?
Remember, Guidry went to the bullpen, I think, in 79.
79. I'm looking it up right now.
An elite starting pitcher because the Yankees had difficulty with, their relief pitching, and he did it for the team. Okay?
Yeah,
and had the Yankees won the pennant that year, you can't hold that against Guidry. Well, they won the pennant, so it wasn't a sacrifice.
Well, he also pinch run for the Yankees at the time. He could have got hurt sliding into first. He didn't have to pinch run. I mean, he was our starting ace, and he pinch runned also. So
that's an additional thing. He left the starting rotation, Guidry, to go to the bullpen for the good of the team, and he voluntarily did that. He's the one that
and-
brought that up, suggested that.
And Babe Ruth stopped pitching when he went to the Yankees too, and he could have been one of the greatest pitchers in the history of baseball.
You know what's interesting? I was thinking of Guidry, and when you say he changed his position, I was thinking of that. Rich Gossage got hurt in 1979. He was in a scuffle in the shower with Cliff Johnson.
Yeah.
And, you know, Guidry the year before was the premier pitcher. He went 25-3.
Yeah.
And then the story was that he went to the bullpen. And so I'm just looking up his game-by-game statistics in 1979. He only pitched I'm trying to find a game where he didn't start. I'm not finding it. He might have only pitched in the bullpen a couple of times here, like in the middle, in the early May 6th. He finished a game. In May 8th, he finished a game by pitching only 3 innings and 2 innings. But around those games, he started. He started on May 2nd. He pitched a complete game. And then by May 16th, he was also starting again, and he pitched a complete game. So he might have only given up like 2 weeks of pitching in the rotation.
Oh, no, I'm not saying he's number one. I'm giving an example of someone making a set.
But I think in my memory, I'm remembering Guidry going to the bullpen for a much longer time. It looks like it was only a couple of weeks.
So anyway,
yeah.
The only point I was making, Jack, is that you're saying a person who made a sacrifice to help the team, and people that are injured that go and play are making sacrifices to their career all the time, and people that take on different roles, of course, that's sacrificing their career. I agree with that, but don't say that my point ain't valid because your
point is valid. No, I'm not putting your point. You make a good point, Mac. I'm not putting your point down at all. You make a very good point. I'm saying Earl Monroe was a superstar in the NBA, superstar, and he took a role to come off the bench with the Knicks. How many superstars? You know, he did it for the team to come over, and he never complained, and he always had a smile on his face, and he was rewarded with, you know, winning a championship, and he was on a par with Walt Clyde Frazier.
Well, I agree with that.
For the Knicks. And he took a supporting role, and he became buddies with Walt Clyde.
Oh, I agree.
No resentment.
Oh, I agree with everything you said there. So,
and James Harden, by the way, what James Harden is doing at this moment, I don't think it's going to last, is unselfish. It's for the good of the team. It's just not going to work out the way it's going. But right now, it's admirable.
And I would agree with that too. So the next topic, guys, is the greatest quarterback in the game today. It started with the original concept was whether it was Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers. I expanded it to the 4 quarterbacks in the championships, and Jack took it and expanded it to the NFL. So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to keep it to the 4 quarterbacks in the championship because I think they're the both best 4 quarterbacks in the NFL today, in my opinion. So while Brady has played really well, he always does. His weapons are endless. You know, we heard Antonio Brown got hurt, but he still has 2 of the best receivers on the team, 2 of the best tight ends in the game. He has a pretty good running game there. So I would say that Brady is in the top, but he does have a lot of weapons. Rodgers is on another level, I would think. His running game with Aaron Jones is probably the best in the NFC. And while Patrick Mahomes is probably the best quarterback in the last 2 years, his receivers are explosive, Jack, and he has one of the best tight ends in the game, probably the top 2 in the game. So that leads me to a quarterback that has to be the league MVP. We've talked about a lot of league MVPs, including Aaron Rodgers. Well, my vote goes to Josh Allen. His throwing accuracy was only question mark a year or 2 ago. And coming into the season, we all know he was probably in the top 3 most dangerous running quarterbacks in the league. You got Jackson, you got Murray, and then you probably got Josh Allen. So he's improved his passing accuracy this year, Jack. He worked hard at it. He even leads in a couple statistics ahead of Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes, believe it or not. His main weapon, of course, is Diggs. You know, Diggs is a great receiver. But after that, who do you got? I mean, you really don't have receivers on a caliber that some of these other teams do. You really don't have a running back I mean, his running back's okay. I mean, he's an NFL caliber running back, but you can't compare him to Aaron.
Singletary, yeah.
Yeah, you can't compare him to Aaron Jones. You can't compare him to even the rookie running back on San Francisco. He's not that good. So when I look at who in the game today, this year, and I'm just limited to this year, who has actually made the biggest impact for a team, who has really we saw what happened when San Francisco's quarterback Patrick Mahomes left. I mean, they still won the game. Aaron Rodgers, I mean, he means a lot to the Green Bay Packers. There's no doubt about that. And he's up in the running for the league MVP also. And Tom Brady is, he's the most accomplished quarterback that ever played the game. There's no doubt about that. But if I had a 3rd and long, Jack, and the pocket broke down and the receivers are covered, which one of those quarterbacks would I want running the ball?
Patrick Mahomes, easy.
It's Josh Allen, easily. Josh Allen's would not only run around you, he'd run through you. The man's a big, a massive quarterback with a good arm. And, well, let me tell you about his arm. I think that Josh Allen is like a mixture of Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers put together. How's that? That's how strong his arm is. And he's got his accuracy is very much improved this year. So if I was to start a team this year, Jack, the current year, my first pick would be Josh Allen.
Mac, you remind me if I once had a handyman, a new guy come to do work on my home. I gave him a job to do. We had the price set, but I potentially needed other work done. The whole time he's yakking to me about all he could do with the other work, but he's not doing any of the darn work I was paying him for. I couldn't get him out of there quick enough. I gave him his money. I finally got him to do some of the work. I couldn't wait to get him out of my house. And I said, I'd get back to him on the other work if I was interested. I never got back to him. Josh Allen's had a wonderful year. At the beginning of the year, we didn't even know whether he was going to be the Bills franchise quarterback. Obviously, he is now. He's had a heck of a year. But we're talking about who's the best quarterback in football at this moment.
Right.
Let's see a little more of a body of evidence from Josh Allen before we could give it to him. Let's just see a little more. They won their one playoff game last week against the Baltimore Ravens, basically on their defensive effort more than anything that Josh Allen did, okay? Let's see them beat Kansas City first with Patrick Mahomes. Let's see him win the Super Bowl. Then you could start making a case for him. I mean, how do you make a case for him over Aaron Rodgers? I don't know. I thought I would have said Patrick Mahomes all season until the last couple of weeks. But you got to look at Aaron Rodgers' body of work over his career. And let's look for a little sign of evidence that Aaron Rodgers has slipped. Your only sign of evidence is going to be, well, he's 37 years old, so he must be slipping. It hasn't shown on any of his performances. His performances show Aaron Rodgers is as good as he's ever been. Until he shows a sign of slippage, how on earth do you put Josh Allen ahead of him, no matter what Josh Allen does? Aaron Rodgers is easily an all-time great.
But we're talking this year, Jack. We're talking this year. We ain't talking about history. We're talking about this year.
This year, who's going to win? Who's going to be the NFL MVP this year? It's going to be Aaron Rodgers.
Josh Allen.
Front runner in everyone's poll. He's the front runner. Everyone's basically conceding the award to Aaron Rodgers. They drafted a quarterback number one. Okay, the Packers. Okay, they didn't give Aaron Rodgers any help in the draft for the last dozen years or whatever, as long as he's been their starting quarterback. Yet he's overcome that. Okay, I mean, in all due respect to Josh Allen, he had a great year. He has a great future, I think, as the Bill quarterback. But to put him ahead of Aaron Rodgers, I mean, even this year, let's narrow it down to this year in fairness to you. The league MVP is, everyone is conceding it to Aaron Rodgers. It's a case closed.
Not everyone, because I'm not, Jack. What do you think, Doc?
I'm thinking that if I had to pick the top three quarterbacks in the NFL right now, and including their body of work with that, I would say three of the four guys who are in the championships. I think the best young quarterback's obviously Mahomes. He's also won a Super Bowl. He's done it. I think Tom Brady and his body of work is unmatched, and I don't think you could say anything except how great he is. And I don't think there were many people that said that the Buccaneers were going to go to the NFC Championship game this year. And what's Tom Brady doing? And he's going down there, and he's 493 years old. And we've seen a lot of quarterbacks and a lot of people try to hang on at the end of their career, and it just doesn't go well. And what has he done? He's led them to the NFC Championship game, and he's going up against one of the great quarterbacks of all time after beating one of the great quarterbacks of all time in Drew Brees last week. So I think for this year, Jack is correct. Everyone is saying that Aaron Rodgers is the MVP. He's had a remarkable season. He also has the history. It's sort of like looking at Aaron Judge a number of years ago when he was hitting those 50 home runs and saying, you know what, he really looks great and he's super, but is he better if Hank Aaron were playing at the same time than Hank Aaron? Even though Hank Aaron maybe didn't hit 50 some odd home runs that year, Hank Aaron still had the body of work. And so I think Aaron Rodgers' body of work has to trump Josh Allen. I think Patrick Mahomes' more recent body of work has to trump Josh Allen. And I think Tom Brady's, in my opinion, the greatest quarterback of all time because nobody's ever done what he's done. So for this year, I'll give it to Aaron Rodgers. My runner-up for this year would be Mahomes, then Brady, then Josh Allen. Again, the Bills haven't necessarily done a whole lot yet. And last week, if Lamar Jackson doesn't throw an interception in the end zone, that could have been a different game, and Josh Allen might have been home today.
Well, we could say the same thing, Doc, if they did not fall out of the Cleveland Browns' hand and it went out of the back of the end zone, and then San Francisco got the ball back because of that rule. Cleveland might have beat Kansas City last week with Patrick Mahomes. So the thing I'm saying, guys, is football is different than most sports. The quarterback is very dependent on other players. They're dependent on their offensive line. They're dependent on the running game. They're dependent on what the defense does. Now, the reason why I say Josh Allen is because the Bills' defense is not one of the best in the league anymore. They went up against Baltimore in some bad weather where neither quarterback could throw the ball. Tom Brady went to a team that was better than the Patriots were for the last 2 years, has more weapons on paper than probably any team in the league. And Aaron Rodgers has one of the best running games in the league. Aaron Jones, if you fake the ball to Aaron Jones when he's running for over 100 yards a game, it's going to suck everybody up watching Aaron Jones. And I'm not taking nothing away any of these quarterbacks because, to me, Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest of all time.
Matt, because no.
Let me finish. And of course, Drew Brees found out how dependent he is on the other team because the Saints kind of dropped off a little bit and Brees got hurt. So, I mean, all I'm saying, fellas, that if you're going to go off this year, this is what the debate was about. It wasn't about last year. It wasn't about 5 years ago. It was about this year. Buffalo Bills, for the first time since 1990, let's see, 89, since 1994, are going back to the championship with a young quarterback who everybody thought wasn't going to be that good. And I'll tell you right now, if you want to go off stats, he's leading those great quarterbacks and some of those stats that they're.
Hey, Matt, we'll see what happens tomorrow with this debate. They still have games to play. Well, Doc is still here. This is a topic I want him to hear about. I want to get the best act of sportsmanship that we were going to debate in sports.
Yes.
And I want to start it out, and I'll try to be brief because of time limitations. As Doc being a principal, I think if he had a choice of showing, in my opinion, what he should do to the students, to tell the teachers, any one act of sportsmanship which carries over into life, I think it's Armando Galarraga and Jim Joyce. The perfect game that was missed. How that turned out, how you deal with disappointment. June 2nd, 2010. I'll try to go quickly for those who might not be aware. Armando Galarraga, the Tiger pitcher, had a perfect game going. One more out to go. The balls hit the first baseman, Miguel Cabrera. He throws Armando Galarraga. He steps on the base before the runner, Jason Donald, gets the first base. They're playing the Indians. But the umpire, Jim Joyce, calls the runner safe when replays showed conclusively he was out. The umpire, Jim Joyce, is devastated that he missed the call. He said, I deprived that kid the chance of doing something historical. He apologized to the pitcher, Armando Galarraga, after. Armando Galarraga hugged him. He said, no pun intended, no one's perfect, mistakes are made. He never complained, Armando Galarraga, about it. Jim Joyce went to the press conference. He owed up to it. He was devastated. He says, I blew it. The damage I caused, he was beside himself. No excuses. And Armando Galarraga the next day comes out to home plate where they hand out the lineup cards. His manager, Jim Leland, thought it would be a good idea. He comes and he hands a lineup card to Jim Joyce to let him know there are no hard feelings and to diffuse any fan animosity. The way the two of them handle it, even President Obama praised them the next day. It's heartwarming. I get emotional just talking about it now.
That's a great one, Jack. I'm going to bring up Andy Roddick real quick. In May 5th in 2005, tennis player Andy Roddick, sportsmanship cost him a victory over Fernando Verdasco. Andy Roddick was number 1 in the world in 2003, number 3 in 2005, and had a serve of 155 miles per hour. And at the Italian Open, he was in the semifinal against Verdasco, and the ball was hit on the line, and the umpire called it out. And Andy Roddick went over to the line, and the umpire was going to go and recheck the call and showed that the ball actually hit the chalk. And with that, Andy Roddick ended up losing that semifinal match. And, of course, Verdasco went on. He didn't win the championship. But if he let that go, the momentum would have still been on his side. He probably would have beaten Verdasco and went on to possibly play in the finals. So he actually gave up a final, by letting the umpire know that the ball was actually in. So.
Yeah, very good. Doc?
That's another good one. I came up with one. Back in 1956, a runner by the name of John Landy, who happened to be the second man ever to run the 4-minute mile, was running in a championship race, and one of his opponents, an up-and-comer, kid named Ron Clark, tripped on somebody's spike and fell. And even though he was running the race, John Landy stopped, lost about 5 seconds or so to check on the other runner, and then continued the race. He actually stepped off the track, so I believe he was then disqualified. He still ran the race, finished in 4 minutes and 4 seconds, and he could have won. He would have won because he still finished in front of everybody else, but I don't think it counted. And you want to talk about sportsmanship, that's another great example. I think they have a statue down at the stadium in Australia commemorizing that moment.
That's a great. I didn't know that happened, and I'm a track and field fan. That's really a great one. There's one that I want to give honorable mention to that I all of a sudden thought. In the 1936 Olympics, Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals. In the long jump, he was struggling, and his main competitor, who was in first place, a German, Lutz Long, saw Jesse Owens was making a mistake where he was stepping too close to the board and fouling, and gave him some advice on, keeping away from the board. And that helped Jesse Owens beat Lutz Long, who was a German, and it couldn't have made the Nazi regime there, because that's where the Olympics were held in 36, too happy, because Lutz Long was a hero in Germany, yet he helped this African-American man defeat him in Germany during the Olympics. And what an act of sportsmanship. And they became friends, Jesse Owens and Lutz Long. I mean, wonderful.
That's a great story, Jack, because, we know what happened back then, how Hitler despised, the black people, thinking that his race was was a little bit more superior than any other race in the world, which was, he was a nut. So we have a little time left over. I just had a comment come across. I don't know if it's true or not. I didn't confirm it, so I'm not going to say anything about it. If it is true, there was someone that might have passed away that's a legend in broadcasting. Is
Larry
it true?
King?
Yeah,
Yeah, I saw that too.
Larry King passed away. So that just came across from Frankie. And since Doc confirms it, I'll put it up. Yeah, Larry King passed away this morning. So great loss, great broadcaster, had a very popular show, and sorry to see him go, but it's such is life, guys. So since we do still have a little time left over, I want to get back to a couple things on the updates. And Jack, you brought up Kyrie Irving, with the Nets, and I brought up how, Steve Nash not says we're going to work on our defense and make it better. He just says that's what it is. What kind of coach, Jack, if you're having a problem, whether it's baseball, football, and you have a problem and say, well, here's Kansas City. Well, our defense stinks, but, we score a lot of points. What kind of coach says that?
Steve Nash, great NBA player, and the things I heard about him as a person, that he's a first-rate person. But I think a coach is as being people who should be in control of the team. He's not in control. I mean, between the ownership, the GM, and listen, I think Kyrie Irving's playing hard since he's come back. It's just the team's not meshing. I think on the court, Kyrie Irving's giving all he has and he wants to win. Part of the problem is outside of the time he spent with LeBron James, Kyrie Irving's underachieved as far as the team concept went. The Cavaliers were losers with Kyrie Irving during the time LeBron James wasn't there. When he went to the Celtics the 1 year, they underachieved. It's that simple. And now he's with the Nets. He's with Kevin Durant, James Harden. You could have all these great superstars, but it's not an individual game like baseball where you could throw your three greatest pitchers ever, one after the other, and it can work. It's the on-court chemistry just isn't there with Kyrie Irving, and Steve Nash has to make it work. I don't think he's strong enough. I don't think he has the clout within the organization, and it's a problem. It's a real problem, the different personalities and everything involved. It's
guys, the thing that sets basketball apart from baseball, football, is that you play both. You play defense and you play offense. I mean, yeah, baseball plays both positions, but it's not at the same time, right? I mean, you can steal the basketball on defense and become offense just like that. And that's where basketball is unique more than other sports. I mean, hockey and soccer, you could say the same thing. But, I mean, you have 5 players on the court at the same time, and they both have to perform well at both ends of the court for your team to be successful. So, to me, if you're coaching a team that scores a lot, you're not going to win a championship just based off that. You've got to be able to play defense, and you got to be able to shoot enough to win, score enough points to win the game. So for me, Jack, I mean, I don't care how many shooters you got, and what your coach is saying. That's not the answer. The answer is we got to play defense, and we're going to do something better to make that happen. And Doc, what do you think about something like that? When you have a coach that resigns to the fact that we're just not good at that, I mean, how does that inspire your team to play better?
It doesn't. I think it goes back to our discussion earlier about the Yankees and defense, and the idea that maybe we can hit enough home runs to win games rather than playing great defense. I think the great coach looks for ways to make all his players better in every way. You don't just say we're not going to play defense.
Well, very quickly investing in a player. The Nets invested an awful lot in these guys, obviously in James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant. Are the Yankees hesitant to sign a Trevor Bauer because of his personality, investing in the personality? Do you think that's an issue here with him still on the free agent market? I was just curious because they see what's going on with Kyrie Irving with the Nets.
I think Bauer's personality could be something that's maybe scaring teams away. In regard to the Yankees, I think they just don't want to spend enough I think he's going to cost too much money in regard to the luxury tax, and they don't want to go over that number.
Yeah, well, I I don't know about Trevor Bauer and his personality, and I don't know a lot about the luxury tax. But I say if you can get a pitcher that's that good, the heck with the luxury tax. Go get it.
You'll play with monopoly money, Mac.
Yeah.
If I own the Yankees, I'd go out and I'd get the best players every single year. The Yankees print money, and there's a cost factor when you don't put the best team on the field, because the Yankees their whole marketing thing is we're the greatest team and we're the greatest franchise. And they haven't won a World Series since 2009, so it's about time to say, like, let's just do it.
I definitely agree with that. So, folks, thanks for joining us for our Saturday debate today. We had the great Paul Semendinger on today, which we have basically every week. He spent the whole hour with us. I'm happy.
He went
about
the distance with us.
Yes,
he sees what we go through each day.
And I don't know how you stood both of us being on at the same time, Doc, but I'm glad you did stop in and spend the whole day with us, or the whole show with us. And folks, we'll be back tomorrow with our football show with Anthony Servino, and also Sports Scope host Robert Butler. Great show. Tune in, and we'll see you tomorrow. Doc, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for always coming in, Jack. We love having you, and I love talking to you. So I don't know why, I'm just nuts. So hey, you guys have a great day. Have a great Saturday, and we'll see you tomorrow.
See you.